Welcome, everyone. I have the talented Beth Snyder with us today, founder and CEO of One Canoe 2. Thank you so much for joining us today, Beth.
I'm happy to talk to you today. Good to see you.
So tell us the story. I'm super interested in One Canoe 2. One, because it's a really successful e-commerce shop, which I'm a big fan of.
Yeah.
But two, your journey of building it, selling and exiting, I really want to dive into that because that is a goal of most of the founders I work with is some sort of exit strategy.
Yeah. I'm hoping that I can kind of tell it from a two-sided point of view. Like, this is what I thought before I sold it, and this is what I know now. I'm about 6 months out, I guess. So just like a quick background on the business, I have a graphic design degree and fibers degree. So what I want to do is design fabric and patterns. So I come very much from a creative standpoint, but I also come from a very practical Midwestern upbringing where my mom was like, you need health insurance. So, I just don't buy into the starving artist. There's no reason for anybody to be starving artists. If you are smart and can figure out a product to sell with your art on it, then you don't have to starve,
Right.
Unless starving is part of your mission and it helps you be inspired, then fine. But that is not my particular journey.
And starving's never very fun.
Not what I like to do.
Yeah.
So I've always had like some little business where I made something and sold it. And I just love to do that. I love to think of something that somebody wants or that would improve their life and figure out all the processes to make it sell. So One Canoe 2 is kind of it was my first really successful business. I quit my job in 2012, but had started One Canoe 2 in 2009. And I had a business partner when I first started who was a childhood friend. She was also an artist, and she exited the business in 2015. So from 2015 to the end of 21, I operated it on my own. And we had artists, 15 employees. We did our own fulfillment. We did marketing. It ran and was like a $2 million business, which was awesome.
That's incredible.
Great. Yeah. I mean, I was always just super thankful. We started out doing letterpress and ended up doing greeting cards and all kinds of other stationery. So it very much is like a lifestyle brand for products and paper and all that kind of stuff. And very intentional products, very much things that we put a lot of thought and care into developing, which really is what the brand was. And it's also how I felt about the brand. I felt very much like I want this to be a great place to work. I mean, I would tell people that I thought my biggest accomplishment was assembling the team of people that I did.
Okay, so that is huge. Like, because the team you have, you can only go so far, right, on your own. But building the team and creating that culture, it almost exponentially allows you to grow and scale.
Yes.
So that I love that you did that.
It does, and then it doesn't. So I had all these people who worked for me for like 6 or 8 years. And then what happened was the things that I got a lot of energy from with the business, which was the art and the creation. And then also the warm fuzzies of the team, because I just really loved all these women who work for me and loved to be in the office with them and, making stuff with them. 2020 kind of took that steam out of it because we worked remote. And then, most people didn't end up coming back to the office because they just liked working at home. And so just the daily charge, I mean, technically it was fine that they wanted to work at home, right? Like, they're doing good work. I have no reason to tell them they have to come in except like, hey, I want to hang out with you. Which is not a good reason, so that kind of went away and I wasn't getting that. And I had 2 artists who I had brought on when my original partner left, and I do art too, but I don't do a lot of the art for actual art for One Canoe 2.
Sure.
So I had these 2 artists that I brought on, and they were really leading the creative charge and having a lot of creative control. And I wanted that for them. I set it up that way. But I accidentally walked myself back out the door of having something of the business being like super energetic for me.
Right.
So in 2018, 2 things happened at the same time. I went to a store in Nashville and bought a bandana that I thought should have been like $10. And when I checked out, it was like $25, which is fine. I was like, wait a second, why was that a 22-inch piece of cloth $25? That's crazy. And then I was like, I bet there's nowhere to make that because I know textiles get made in India, not in the US.
Yeah.
I bet that I was just thinking all the things I knew about the market from having been in it for 10 years at that point. And then right after that, I went to India with my friend Missy, who you also know from Twisted Wears, to visit her vendor, because she and I were starting a company together called June Clever, which was like funny tea towels. Well, it turns out we didn't do the product testing that we should have. And by product testing, I mean, like, we didn't take it to, we were just like, this is obviously going to sell. We know what we're doing here. And then, there just really wasn't a market for it. The tea towel business is pretty full. So, so we both learned hard lessons, but the best thing that came out of that was that I went to India with her and met her vendor who makes textile things. And I was like, do you think you can make a bandana? And he definitely could, and at a tiny cost compared to what you could sell them for. And so then I'm on Instagram and like, thinking, I said to somebody, I think bandanas are about to have a moment. And so I didn't tell my whole team about it, my One Canoe team, for a long time, because I didn't want anybody to say anything about it. I was like, I think I can just start this up with like $5,000 and like not really. And when I did tell them about it, I said, nobody touch this. Nobody is going to spend any time on it until I am sure that this is going to make money.
Right.
And I've just kept them really separate. So that company is called Hemlock Goods. Yeah. And then 2020 happened, and that was a good time for bandanas.
Bandanas did have a day in the sun.
They did. And they still are. It's still going really well.
Bandanas are amazing.
Yeah. And I took One Canoe 2 was just so many hours of work. It was just, it was a decade of really hard lessons and working really hard to do all the things. And then I was like, I'm going to do this differently with my next company. So Hemlock, it's easy to ship because you can't break it. It's light. The margins are amazing. I just keep it to bandanas. Yeah. It's very easy to market, which is super important. And also they're $14. So it's such an easy thing to impulse purchase on Instagram.
It's amazing. Well, and what's great about that is, because I went through Hemlock Goods, and you have such cool designs in really unique colors. Yeah. So I feel like you're taking the bandana, which is typically, when I think of a bandana, I think of the red bandana with the white. Yeah. Like kind of but also with like that pretty classic Western style. Yeah. Right. Yes. And like, that's what I think about a bandana. But then when I went and checked out Hemlock, there's like all these different designs and styles. And I was like, maybe I'm a bandana guy.
I will send you some. You should pick some out. I'll send them to you.
Like, maybe I'm a bandana guy.
You totally should be.
I love that.
So yeah, I mean, and it all starts with like a great product, right? Like there's nobody out there selling. There's $2 bandanas that you can buy at Walmart, or there's $40 ones that are hand screen printed and artisan, which are lovely, but there's nothing in this like lower range. There's nothing in any interesting colors at all, which color is my big thing. And plus I just love fabric and textures and all that kind of stuff. So
it makes a huge difference. Like the tactile feeling of stuff is so cool.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, it all starts with a good product. Like if you have I had a good idea, and then I knew how to do all the other things. I knew how to do wholesale. I knew how to set up a website and do e-commerce, and I know how to do fulfillment. So I haven't hired. The only person I've hired is a customer service person. Everything else, I'm like, we're not hiring this. We're not hiring that. I'm not bringing in all these people. It just doesn't need it. I'm just going to keep it simple. And it's super profitable. It's more profitable than One Canoe 2 ever thought about being.
You know what's so interesting? Okay, there's a couple lessons here. One, you learned a significant amount doing One Canoe 2. Yes. And instead of making the same mistakes, which is really easy to do, right? Because we kind of get in our groove and we're like going along, and there's not a lot of self-awareness sometimes. Right. But you learned those lessons, you applied them to the new thing, and now you're reaping the rewards of that, which is incredible.
Yeah, it's great. And it feels like a little bit like cheating, if I'm being honest. I have a business, I'll call him my business therapist, but he's a licensed, he's a PhD guy. Organizational psychologist. Also, fun fact, he used to be my shipping guy. He was my first full-time hire 12 years ago. And
that's incredible.
He will tell you he was not great at that job, but I told him, you don't have to do this job or be good at it, but this is a means to an end. So just view it that way. Do the best job you can. So I don't have to fire you until you figure out what you want to do. But I spent a lot of time talking to him about like, are we sure that this is okay? I'm making this much money on nothing, no work is going into this. Hemlock, I mean, hardly any work goes into that, and it just does fine. And shouldn't I be working harder? It doesn't feel like it should be this easy to make money. But I guess it is. I'm just I have a hard time wrapping my head around that. We talk about it a lot.
So here's my perspective on that, which I think you actually have done the hard work. You just did it for another business.
Mm-hmm.
You learned the really hard lessons at One Canoe too.
Right.
And instead of doing, which is humans love to do, instead of making those same mistakes, you learn from them.
Yeah.
And you said, you know what, I'm not going to do that. I don't need all this thing. The other thing that I love about that is not only did you learn the hard lessons and apply them, so I feel like you did pay your dues, right?
Yes.
You did. You paid your dues in a big way.
Maybe One Canoe too was my law school or medical school. Both one of my sisters is a doctor, one is a lawyer, and they, had to go through their years. Maybe I'll just think of that. That was my education.
That was your education. The other thing, though, that's really interesting about Hemlock is you kept it simple.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I find that founders always want to do is they feel like if they can make it more complex, then it'll be more valuable or it'll scale faster.
Right.
But what we found is it's the exact opposite. So in marketing, coming from like a marketing side of like, how do you drive revenue? How do you grow a business? People are really astounded when we come to the table with our strategies because they're very simple.
Yes.
And they'd be like, well, there's got to be more to it. I'm like, well, just like you, we paid our dues for years and years doing it in a lot of different ways. And this is what works best.
Right. And we know that.
And we know that. And so like keeping it simple, I feel like is such an important strategy, both in setting up a business, running a business, and then growing a business.
Yeah.
The simplicity matters.
I mean, I just keep thinking we did backpacks for Hemlock for a little bit. And I keep thinking I need to expand the line beyond just bandanas. And I'm like, no. That sells. And here's the super interesting thing that I think could be translated to e-com or trade shows or whatever. But One Canoe 2, we had a huge expensive trade show booth, 20 foot by 12 foot, cost tons of money. We have 1 million SKUs. We have 600 SKUs. That's a ton. And we have tea towels and cards and calendars and whatever. Everything. And people walk into the booth and they would look around, super overwhelmed. Sometimes they would walk out. Other times they would walk around for 15 minutes before they're like, okay, I can write an order. And then I took Hemlock to its baby first trade show. And I just put a sign on the wall that said minimum order $150, wholesale price is $7.
Yeah.
And that was my pitch when they walked in. They're $7 wholesale, $150 minimum order. And people are like, okay, I'll order. And there's 50 SKUs. And so what I'm calling that, trademarking it as, is the delight of choice versus the burden of choice. The burden of choice is One Canoe 2, which we did all these things because we could. But the delight of choice is like, okay, I have 50 things to choose from. I'm not overwhelmed, but I'm excited about it. This is going to be a fun buying process.
For sure.
And I just think there's something really valuable in that.
You know what's so interesting? This is another principle that we teach right in line with that, Beth, that we teach all of our clients. It's that typically 80% of your revenue comes from like 4 or 5 SKUs.
Yep.
It's not the same for every business. There's always outliers, but like 80% of the time, the majority of revenue is coming from a couple key products.
Right.
But we as humans, we want to like stacking complexity. We want to like mix it up. We were like, I need more. And it's like, no, we actually just need to lean into these 5 products.
Right. And then we tell ourselves, but if we didn't have this, then we wouldn't sell that. I mean, 60% of what One Canoe 2 sells is greeting cards. If you do the math, 60%. Yeah. So, and we're on autopilot. We know how to make those. We know how to do a good job with those. Doesn't take any time, but then we're like bending over backwards trying to create this beautiful handmade paper heirloom recipe book that comes in a cloth box. I mean, it is amazing, but the amount of work that takes to do those products over and over again, you're like, should we just do cards and do them really well? Maybe. I don't know.
There's a lot of value in that idea of focusing and refining and getting really good at a couple core things.
Right. Yeah.
And I think you experienced that at Hemlock, right? You got really good at like a pretty core offering.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the goal. And so now I've got a couple other little business ideas that I'm going to set up and I think do in exactly the same model that I'm in sourcing phase with.
I love that.
Do that because I have all the skills and I have all the facilities here. I also own a fulfillment company where we do fulfillment for little for other little companies like ours, that we can do it in a way that feels like personal to them.
Yeah.
And make sure they're really well taken care of, and so are their customers. Because I'm in Fulton, Missouri, which is not exactly a metropolis, but it is as close to the center of the country. If you threw a dart, it's as close to the center as you can imagine. So, and right along the interstate.
Right, really good spot. So for the listeners that would be interested in fulfillment with you, what is the name of your fulfillment company?
It's called Court Street Custom Fulfillment. It barely even has a website because we have a list of clients who want to come on. That's very long, and we only have like 8 clients now. We're bringing on one more next week.
Awesome.
And as soon as I can kick out the 24-hour fitness center in the strip mall next to me, we'll have more room. So I'm trying to do my like Monopoly moves down the strip mall. And eventually at the end of the strip mall is a grocery store, and I'm going to buy that building, and then I'll really be in business.
Then you'll really be in fulfillment.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love that. So you mentioned at the beginning with One Canoe 2, you built this thing up, had it really rock and rolling, and then you sold it.
So in 2020, that I never had the idea that I was going to sell it. And my somebody cold called me once and asked what my plan was to cash out, and I was relaying that message to my sister, who's a business lawyer and has a finance degree and stuff, is really smart. And I said, "Well, I'm never going to cash out." She goes, "No, you always cash out." And that was probably 5 years ago. And I was like, "Really? Okay." And like lifestyle businesses have kind of a timeline, and
they do.
I definitely have, my attention span has a timeline. So I feel like I've created all the interesting things within One Canoe 2 I can ever do. So when the pandemic hit, this woman that I had met at a conference in 2015, she owns a company called Inked Brands, which they have like 10 or 15 brand partners that they work with.
I've heard of Inked Brands.
They basically just they find somebody like me, or they find an artist, somebody who has a good following, and they say, "Let us do the back end of everything for you." And so they help with product development, they source it, they fulfill it, they help with marketing. And then the artist or influencer, the brand partner, can just do content for their audience, which is amazing. So maybe you're an amazing scrapbooker and you have a great audience, and then you want to run a fulfillment warehouse too? Okay. Yeah. No, that's just not a good use of anybody's time. So, so her name's April Foster. She's the same age as me. She started her first business in 2009 or something, the same time I started One Canoe 2. And so we have this like similar path.
Yeah.
She is a super hard-nosed businesswoman who loves creativity and likes to do art. I am a artist who likes business and loves to do that. So it's like kind of like a yin and a yang,
Yeah, that's amazing.
We're a really good match because we balance each other out, I think. But her company does digital marketing. And so in like May of 2020, she's like, "Hey, how are you doing over there? Everything okay?" And I was like, "I'm freaking out."
Yeah.
And we signed on with Ink to do our Facebook ads and Instagram ads. And they pretty much tripled our revenue right out the gate, like within 2 months.
Wow.
And that was, before some of the iOS changes and stuff. But I was like, oh, okay, they mean business. And then once that was kind of rolling and proved that they could make a difference, and she's like, we might be interested in acquiring. And I was like, no. But we just kept talking about it.
Yeah.
And it probably took 18 months from the first time she mentioned it to the time that the deal closed. Wow. So I sold it in December, and I no longer own One Canoe 2 at all, but I'm a part-time employee of Inked. Yeah. And my title is VP of Creative, which is super fancy.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But my job is just to kind of be an entrepreneur within their business, to help oversee all the creative departments. And they're a creative business, they're making creative products. So at the end, it's like such a hard decision because it felt like my baby.
Totally.
Excuse me, COVID. One Canoe 2 felt like my baby in so many ways, but I had 12 years of love, but also 12 years of baggage with it.
Totally. Well, you invested so much time and energy.
Oh my gosh. There was a time when I couldn't imagine selling it. And then it started to feel, I think the pandemic started it when I just had all these employees that I felt very beholden to and like responsible for their families and their livelihoods. And that
for sure,
really clear, but yeah, so I did all these pros and cons, and I'm not kidding when I say every 3 days, I'd flip whether I wanted to sell it or not, even up till the very end.
I love that. Too good.
But the pros and cons list was so hard because they were very equally weighted. It's like, well, there's risk on either side. If I keep it and, some other global thing happens, great. That's terrible. If I sell it and that company tanks, that's a problem because I was going to finance it. Right. And I could learn a lot. Well, I felt like there's risk or there is reward potential both ways. Like all the things felt equal and my employees all got amazing offers and got to go to the new company. I felt like it was going to be so great for them because they'd have a career path, Up until the last minute, I kept waffling back and forth with the pros and cons list pretty equal.
Yeah.
Except I felt like if I could sell and I could be on the inside of Inked and see how they run a bigger company. It's still small. Yeah. They have like 100 or 150 employees, I think. But I just felt I had like a lot to learn and they were going to give me access to that. And so I just felt like there's the value. Like that's the thing that's going to tip the scales.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's incredible. And that's a big piece, right? Is a lot of times the choices we make, the outcomes can be determined by the perspective we bring into that choice, right? Yes. And there's always a negative and there's a positive to everything. And you can find that story. Mm-hmm. But by investing in learning and progression and growth, 9 times out of 10 always leads to much better results.
Yeah. Always. I mean, how else could I learn like how a bigger company works, how investments work, how mergers work? Yeah. I just like, what an incredible opportunity. And I was really nervous about working for somebody else because frankly, I'm just not cut out for it. So I would not accept a full-time job, I don't think. But part-time felt more flexible to me. And yeah, I mean, when I set my standards for, am I being fulfilled? Do I like this job? Yeah. My question is, am I learning? Yeah. And I am learning. And therefore I'm happier in this job than I've ever been in any other job. So that's
incredible.
Yeah. Growing,
amazing, Beth. That's amazing. So as you look back in this whole process, right? Because this has been a journey, many years in the making, and then going through that whole emotional process of deciding to sell and then finally committing to that, now you're on this new path as you continue to grow and expand, which is amazing. What are like 1 or 2 of the takeaways that you could share with someone that's maybe considering, hey, I'd like to get my e-commerce business to the point where I could sell it? What advice would you give that person?
I mean, there's lots of nuts and bolts things, right? Like, first of all, always keep your books straight. Yeah. Always, like down to the little, seemingly little, but we had a lot. We never kept inventory of our envelopes and sleeves. And so that wasn't on our books when we first turned in our books to the new company. We hadn't done things like that because we didn't need to. And employees really need to have employment contracts and all that stuff because that needs to be just clear, and laid out in a clear way. So those kinds of nuts and bolts things. But I think I know that what part of the reason that Inked wanted to acquire us was because of the team that I had assembled, and I sold it to them that way. And then out of the 6 people that transferred to Inked, because our fulfillment staff stayed here. So our fulfillment staff's now working on my fulfillment company. So I didn't transfer them. And they were a huge part of the total headcount at One Canoe too. But so 7 of us transferred and 4 people quit in the first 4 months.
Oh, interesting.
Oh my gosh. And I have shed a lot of tears about it. I have been really, that surprised me so much. And I know it shouldn't have surprised me. Now, just even having learned what I've learned, should not have surprised me as much as it did. Because I had built a staff of people who I think were there for me because they liked working, not just with me, but also with the rest of the team. And so once one of those dominoes fell and things are a little bit more structured, and honestly, I thought I did such a good job with culture and running the business and stuff. And in the end, what I realized that I've done, what I had done with that culture of people is I let them never be uncomfortable. Anytime a challenge had to happen, anytime something got hard, I took on the hard thing and shielded them from it. Which is not to say they never did anything hard, but for sure. I certainly didn't even let them have the gift of doing a hard thing and learning that they could do it.
Wow.
And
Okay.
several of those employees started working for me when they were in college.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I raised them. I felt like they were my babies. And then when they left, they left me. But also I left them first because I was real burnt out on managing them because I took so much of their emotional energy on and tried to protect them at every turn. Well, that's not really the work that I'm cut out to do. I'm not a nurturer, really.
Yeah, no, but that's okay. There's so much wisdom here, Beth. There's so much wisdom here. And let me try to pull out some of these gems. So one is that, I mean, you really cared for these people, but the fact that they had continued employment after you sold, that's rare. Mm-hmm. Most times when you sell, they clean house. Mm-hmm. And so like that is like you showing up as an amazing founder, really taking care of your team. That speaks volumes to me personally. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The second gem that I think is here is this idea of we love them so much and we care for them so much. This happens with me as a dad. I shelter my kids from doing hard things.
So much like parenting. So much
like parenting. Like in our agency, like let's say, for example, we have to have a tough conversation with the client. Years ago, I would step in and always have that conversation. Now I'm empowering my team to have that conversation.
Yes.
Because what I've realized is I'm not serving myself or them by taking that opportunity from them.
Right. Yep.
And I think you've learned that now as well, like going through this whole process and seeing how they've grown and how they've developed. And then the last gem, I think, to pull from that is that there are so many things that are out of our control. Mm-hmm. Right? There just is. There's a lot of things that we can't necessarily control.
I do not care for that answer, Taylor. I do not care for it.
I know. There's certain things like you did everything you could to prep these people for success. And then you said, all right, fly. Like there's this big company you get to be a part of, and there's growth opportunities, and there's not a ceiling. In a lot of small brands, there's a ceiling.
Right.
You know, you can only go so far if there's 10, 12, 15 people.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you're like, all right, little bird, like fly, here it is.
Like, hey guys, look, I brought us to this amazing cliff. Let's all jump off. I'm excited to jump off. Aren't you excited to jump off? And they're like, no, you've never taught us how to jump. We don't know.
So I think like at the end of the day, there's only so many things you can control as a founder.
Right.
But I do love that story. That is incredible. And that's good advice. Like those are really.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I have learned so much about leadership and what ways that I could have done it better. And yet, like, I could feel myself starting to make this similar mistakes. It's just hard to make people feel uncomfortable. And it's hard to tell people something they don't want to hear. I'm up for the challenge. I just need to do it,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel I've thought about this so many times in terms of parenting. Like, it feels like I sheltered them. And I mean, I'm sure they wouldn't say that. They also like grew, and it's never as simple as all that. But I took a lot of that on, and then I was kind of resentful about it, honestly. Or not resentful, but just like burnt out and ready to not do it anymore.
Right. Ready to move in a new direction. And there's seasons to everything, Right. And you were in that business for so long and sacrificed so much to get it to that point.
Right.
I think it was very wise what you did. Is transitioning and creating that into a mutual win for the employees and for yourself. Like, I think it's incredible. And
the funny thing is, I'm actually doing more creative work for One Canoe 2 now than I've done in probably 4 years.
And that's the best. Like, that's your strength.
Yeah. I mean, I always say this is my particular genius is artwork on products. And so now I'm not only doing that for One Canoe 2, but I'm doing it for a bunch of brands.
Yeah.
And feel like I can really contribute within that corporate structure. So
that's incredible.
Yeah, I'm super happy about my new job. Like, I'm learning a ton. It's really interesting. I like all the people there, And
that's what it's about. But the cool thing that I love personally from hearing your story and kind of digesting all this is you built this up, you had a great exit, you're continuing to expand while you build some other businesses as well. Mm-hmm. So you're doing the things that you're really passionate and really good at. Mm-hmm. And starting to push some of the stuff aside that doesn't really light you up, the stuff that's not as fun and exciting. And that's amazing. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, it's all about I worked in TV for a long time in graphic design. I did graphic design for TV news for really 10 years, but 6 years full time. And what I learned is like, when there's a deadline and it is 4 p.m., or 6 p.m. or whatever time it is, you have a deadline, you're going to get all this stuff thrown at you. It doesn't matter what happens. Something has to go on the air at this time.
Right.
So you're going to start with doing the thing that absolutely has to be done. And then you're going to keep adding better and better stuff to it until 6 p.m. when it better be in the folder for the director to pull up. So I'm just trying to do that now. I'm just trying to do the things I really need to do and like make sure I'm using my time and my particular experience to do what I really should be doing in the world, and that nothing feels better than that, than feeling like you're doing what you should be doing in the world.
That's exactly right. Finding that purpose, finding that mission and leaning into that is amazing.
Yeah.
Fires me up. Well, Beth, this has just been incredible to hear your story, hear you talk about that journey, some really valuable gems throughout this whole. So thank you so much for sharing your story. Yeah.
I love to talk to people about it. It's so interesting to be on the side of it.
It is. It's fascinating.
The psychology of it. It's so interesting. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate your time and your feedback today. And thank you again for sharing your story.
Yeah, so good to talk to you, Taylor. Thank you.